some boring subjects.
Understand the risk to our country.
Freedom brings people together.
You're listening to the We Are Libertarians Network. Learn more at wearelibertarians.com.
Welcome to the Chris Spangle Show. My name is Chris Spangle. It is so great to be with you. And today we are talking about police accountability a year after the George Floyd killings. And what has changed? What should change? If anything, we'll see. We're talking to Jason Bassler, of Police the Police and the Free Thought Project. So stay tuned.
Warning. This show is for adults by semi-adults, so the language is sometimes strong and offensive.
I don't know what I said.
Welcome to the Chris Spangle Show. Our goal is to help you sound smarter while talking to your friends. If you struggle to understand politics, we explain it from an independent, libertarian point of view. With all of the irreverence it deserves, we toss out the screaming heads, put people before political parties, and give context to the news to make you think. Now, here's our host, Chris Spangle, a 15-year veteran of politics and media.
Thank you for joining us here on the Chris Spangle Show. It's so great to have all of you with us. Before we start, we always thank our patrons. And now everybody who listens and supports our advertisers, because you're what makes the We Are Libertarians Network function. There are 13 shows on this network now, and the costs of that are a lot. And we offset that cost through Patreon, and so if you want to help create new libertarians and help people sound smarter when they're talking with your friends, and really it's the value for value system. We have completely ripped this off from the No Agenda Show. If you take value from the Chris Spangle Show and the We Are Libertarians Network, then give some value back. $5 a month, you get ad-free shows. You get, at $10 a month, the history of modern politics, and twice a month. And we just try to give you a lot of value here at the We Are Libertarians Network, and we just ask that you pitch in. And there ain't no such thing as a free lunch. Foundational libertarian principle, somebody pays if it's free to you. And our All-Stars, our $100 a month members at Wall Plus, are John Pusilo, Casey Feldposh, Lars Nordskog, Jake Edel, Matthew Durbin, Jeff Bennett, Reinhold, Christy Avery, and Jason Doolittle. And you can become a member of Wall Plus by, it's WAL. Join WALplus.com, join wallplus.com, or go to Patreon. And thank you so much. Now, here with us, and Jason, just to let you know, there is still a little bit of feedback in your mic. As always, Reinhold's joining us here. Reinhold, I can't introduce you first. We go by seniority. So, Harry Price, how are you today?
Going good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm deciding on a new style, and I think I've selected Golf Dad. That's what we're doing.
Good.
So, suspended maturation through video games was out, not my style, and I can't pull off Yellowstone Dad with cowboy wear. So Golf Dad it is. Aging hippie is Reinhold's style. He has a ponytail today. Reinhold, how are you?
I'm doing very well today. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. And Tricia Stewart-Mann, host of Gingerarchy. She is also here. Please go listen to Gingerarchy. You've been killing it lately. Who are some of the guests that you've been having on your podcast?
The last guest I had was an incredible show. That was Michael Maharrey from the 10th Amendment Center. So really good show about Christianity and anarchy. So
that's great. Yeah. And one of your guests was, and one of the features, Jason, on this show is my complete unprofessionality and never asking the guests that come on their name, pronunciation. I can't even say that. Is it Bassler? Jason Bassler? Okay, I thought so. All right. So Jason Bassler joins us. You are the founder of Police the Police and the co-founder of the Free Thought Project, one of the few people who has been throttled and banned off of social media more than We Are Libertarians.
This is true. Yeah, they love censoring us.
Now, tell us. Let's start with Free Thought Project. Tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll talk about Police the Police and get into the topic for today. Tell us, what is Free Thought Project?
Sure. Well, good morning, and thanks for having me on, of course. And, I always love talking shop. I must say this is probably one of the earliest interviews I've ever done, seeing it's 7 a.m. in California over here.
I didn't know it was so early there. We would have done it later for you. I'm so sorry. But thank you for joining us.
No worries at all. It's for a good cause. So I'm happy to be here. But yeah, the Free Thought Project. I started the Free Thought Project with co-founder Matt Agarist. He's also our editor-in-chief. In 2013, it's primarily government accountability, although we touch on some other topics occasionally as well. But yeah, the main focus is the Free Thought Project and Police the Police. It's kind of the double-sided threat there. So
what is Police the Police? Let's talk about what you do there.
Sure. Police the Police is mostly an online organization. It's basically a platform for documenting and archiving police brutality, police misconduct, and abuse of authority. Okay, so,
and was there any relation to Cop Block? I remember Cop Block, but I don't think that's necessarily around anymore. Maybe there's,
yeah, they're still going. It's just not as prevalent, but yeah, it's related in the sense that I was inspired by them, and about a year after creating Police the Police, we kind of joined forces. Cop Block is more of just a decentralized idea, so even though there were founders, it was more of just a loose-knit based group of people who promoted the idea. So
yeah, and like Harry said, didn't the page get sold? And Cop Block was one of the early banned accounts. And basically, the thought, and correct me if I'm wrong, was you'd start a local group that would go out and film local police in action, and it was basically to block police abuses through surveillance, citizens surveilling the state, essentially. Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's correct. You know, there were already cop watch groups that had kind of started in like the 90s and early 2000s. But if I remember correctly, Cop Block was created in 2010. And yeah, that's exactly the premise. It was kind of one step above the cop watching. It was more trying to get involved, trying to possibly share people's rights with them if they happen to be targeted by police during a traffic stop or some kind of other police encounter. So, yeah, I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head.
So, essentially, you know, like I say on the show all the time, this is my fourth takeover. I'm an old timer. I've been around a long time, and you have too. And when I first got into libertarianism and joined the cult in 2007, 2008, God forbid we open this up to Reinhold, who's been around since the 80s, but like the police accountability movement, if there was a movement, was, I mean, a lot of extreme people. Like I go back to on our show, Maya Axton, Harry, who, you know, was a crazy violent anarchist at the time, and was just intentionally trying to provoke and trying to get a rise out of people. It seems to have matured a lot. It seems like there has been a maturation and a societal acceptance of the idea that citizens are supposed to watch police. I mean, for me, the first domino to fall was Dorner. Is it not Eric Dorner, in L.A., who's the LAPD cop who started killing other cops. And instead of giving him due process, they just lit the cabin that he was in on fire. And I went, whoa, okay, if they're going to do that to themselves, maybe some of this stuff has merit. And then Ferguson took place, and it kind of, you know, culminated, I think, for most of the country last year in George Floyd's killing, and saying there's a problem here. But I think, first, let me ask, like, what is that maturation process that you've seen being on the ground in terms of activism for policing the police? What have you seen over the last decade?
You're spot on there, Chris. It certainly has become more of a mainstream issue, which, you know, we probably have mixed feelings about, right? But I do think the George Floyd video and case was a boiling point. So, yeah, going back, taking a step back, Cop Block probably was one of the first to kind of more focus on the libertarian side of police accountability and what libertarianism and the non-aggression principle could really do to bring that to a larger audience. Primarily before that, it was more of a leftist idea to cop watch and have any type of accountability with police. And as you had stated, yeah, Dorner probably was one of the big first mainstream cases that had a lot of attention to it, and rightfully so, right? He was certainly no angel, although I think that we can sympathize with his plight, but he certainly got their attention. There was, quite a dramatic chase that ensued trying to find him, with even police putting over 100 rounds into a similar truck that looked like his, not the same make or color, of course. So that was certainly a big turning point. Kind of got the attention of a lot of people like ourselves, a lot of libertarians, anarchists and whatnot. So
and Dave Chappelle focused on him last year in his like 20-minute, 30-minute special on Netflix, and I think he nailed a lot of the feelings that I had around that as well. So I would definitely check that out, Dave Chappelle's special last year. But Dorner, I think, was like the beginning for a lot of libertarians. Like there was some people who had focused on it, like the folks in Keene and Free Keene. I remember hearing the guys on Free Talk Live basically say, we can't keep police in Keene anymore because we take them out to lunch and have a polite conversation with them and make them think about ideas, and then they just quit. But that was like the first activism that I had really heard about, and then along comes Black Lives Matter and some of this other stuff. But continue on your thought about the evolution here.
Sure. So me personally, where I realized that there was a major issue, a profound, problem here, is that Occupy Wall Street, and that was 2011. So I think, it's safe to say that police were pretty heavy-handed during that protest as well. They were certainly aggressive, abusive to the protesters, regardless of age, color. It was pretty much indiscriminate. So at that point, I kind of realized, hey, like, this doesn't sit right with me. Like, this isn't the way it's supposed to be. I personally need to get involved. I personally need to up my game. I need to use, any tools that I have in front of me to kind of try to understand what's going on. So, that's around when I decided to create Police the Police, which was a year later in 2012. But Black Lives Matter didn't come around until, around Ferguson and the Mike Brown case. That was 2014, which I actually went to. I was in Ferguson for that whole protest and trying to document the whole scene. And
what did you see there? Because we tried to cover it, but it just with the right wing press and the mainstream press, which is left wing press, it's hard to really like sort out what happens anymore. And it really feels like Ferguson was kind of the 2007 to 2014 was like really the beginning of that. Like, I don't know what's going on. I'm kind of throwing my hands up. And Ferguson was, in my mind, one of the first big things where you just didn't know which side to believe.
Sure. Well, contrasting that, though, there wasn't an established right wing that was decrying, fake news and fraud and all this other stuff. I think at that point, the right was still a bit sympathetic, although, they still labeled Mike Brown a thug and whatnot. It seemed like there wasn't as much of a polarization as there is today. But as far as what I saw in Ferguson, I was on the ground for 5 days there in October. So it was a couple months after the actual event itself. It was called the Weekend of Resistance. And, it was wild, to be honest. We were all over the place. We were at various different protests, sometimes being in front of the Ferguson Police Department, sometimes branching out to other areas of the city. They were pretty creative as far as how they protested and trying to make as much, disorganization and chaos with their protests to keep police on their toes, to really voice how, disgruntled they were about the situation. So, we were at gas stations protesting. And of course, I was there with my camera. So I say we were protesting. I was also covering it, trying to play also in the role of journalist. I remember at one point we even went into a casino, and, there were probably 100 of us who just swarmed up in different cars. And, we went into the casino. We went to all these different various places and started, chanting, protesting, pulling out the signs. And as soon as the protesters caught wind that police were actually on their way, everybody just ran out to their cars again and went to the next spot. So they were very coordinated. And at that point, again, like there wasn't this polarization as there is now. So I can't say that I saw, many libertarians out on the streets protesting or Boog Boys or any of these other types of groups, but it didn't feel like there was a big divide as there is now.
Yeah. So what do you think created that divide? I mean, it's probably big, loud, and orange, but like, how did we get to a place where, I had a conversation with somebody and they said the last two conservative organizations that have not fallen to wokeness are the police and the military. And that's why you see a lot of right-wing people really like freak out when the pride flag on the local police department happens.
Sure. Yeah. Well, at the same time, the right has been people who have always valued the Constitution. And look, police have been stomping on the Fourth Amendment and the Constitution for 50 plus years now, enforcing drug laws. So, we can't. Let's just say they're not the most consistent people, although we might share some commonality with, private property rights and individualism and stuff. Unfortunately, the right doesn't seem to be entirely consistent on this topic. But I get that. That's an interesting perspective. I would say that it probably was a big turning point was the Trump presidency. We started seeing a lot more thin blue line flags, a lot more, Blue Lives Matter rhetoric. It seemed like that was probably the big turning point.
Oh, I think Chris had to step away for a second, but and with your point in that, Jason, as far as libertarians becoming more active, have you seen, you said originally you didn't see a lot of that in Ferguson. Have you seen a lot of growth in the libertarian anarchist space as far as police?
Sorry, I think you cut out there for a second, but I think I got the gist of your question. And that, I believe, is probably one of the big reasons the Free Thought Project and Police to Police had a lot of success when we first started. It was because people were hungry for different alternative perspectives away from more of like the left-leaning police accountability thoughts and talking points and whatnot. So I would say that was probably one of the big reasons that we had a lot of. Whoa, there goes my cat.
Totally relatable.
I think there has been. I think Cop Block and Police to Police have been instrumental in sharing these different solutions, kind of non-establishment based solutions, which right now are basically, defunding the police and reform. Those are kind of the two that are being heavily focused on. So I do think we provide utility to the libertarian anarchist subsect, and we generally talk about these issues that a lot of other organizations won't touch with a 10-foot pole. So
yeah, it seems to me that the ideas that were kind of fringe and radical in the 2010s and the Cop Block days are now being talked about on mainstream news outlets, and I think people lose track of time. But when we talk about police accountability, let's define that. Like when we say police accountability or police reform, what does that look like? What are the problems, I guess? Maybe what are the problems, and then we can talk about the solutions. But like, what do you see? Is it? I have friends who say, look, and police will say this. You see a video out of context, you get mad about it, and then we pretend, and this happens a lot, it's nut picking, right? You take the nut and you pretend that every libertarian is the guy running through the Capitol, or every Trump supporter is this, or every liberal is double masking, vaccinated, and praising Fauci, right? Like, sure. We nut pick. So if I were to say to you, aren't you doing that, where you take these videos of police excesses and pretending that that's all cops? Like, aren't you doing something unfair? Is this really systemic? What would you say to that?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great point. And I guess it's a value premise. How much do you care about these topics? How much do you care about the sanctity of life? How much do you care about accountability? These things are probably different to everybody, right? Accountability to me means transparency. It means actually having responsibility for our actions, regardless of if you're wearing a badge or if you wrap the label of government around you. I feel like police accountability has changed significantly in the sense that it's more of a mainstream topic now. We saw Rodney King in 1993, and that was a big turning point as well. That died down, right? And let me remind you, that was one video of a beating, right? Rodney King wasn't killed in that. But since then, we've seen hundreds, if not thousands, of viral videos about this very topic, about police excessive force, about police violence.
So essentially, one drop is one thing, but how many drops does it take to make a lake?
Sure. Well, I could tell you some statistics. I would say, in 2020, there were only 18 days where police didn't kill somebody. Generally, on average, police kill over 1,000 Americans every year. The statistics on how many of those people were armed and unarmed vary. And it's hard to really get a grasp on how many of those people actually provoked some type of situation with police. But to me, and I would suggest, the funniest part about this is that, we have these people on the right who claim that they're, pro-America and pro-Constitution, yet they don't say a word. And if anything, they justify when lethal force is used by police rather than taking a look and saying, hey, like these people are Americans who are being killed by police. So again, this is just, I guess, a personal preference. I guess this also is about subjective morality. What to you do you believe is important in society? To me, funding police with our tax dollars, I think that gives us every opportunity, that gives us every right to try to hold police accountable, because ultimately these dollars are being extracted from us involuntarily to fund these services. And we have to do everything we can to try to keep these people accountable while this mechanism is still in place.
Yeah, and I would say, and Harry, I'll jump to you in just a second. I would say teachers, cops, and firefighters, like we're turning them into a special class of citizen. And they're the ones that are they're the largest group of people funded by the state. And can you talk about why that is a dangerous mentality, but also the nature of policing? They're the vanguard of the state, and they have an extra duty to be held accountable, do they not?
Yeah, absolutely. They are the strong arm enforcers for the ruling class. So yeah, I mean, absolutely. If anybody in society needs to be held accountable, it's the police. Of course, the military is right there, up there with them. But, we don't see teachers not being held accountable, right, if they do something that's completely off basis or out of line. We don't see them having different legal opportunities to be immune from law. So the problem here, I think, ultimately is that these institutions are funded by taxation, which creates a monopoly on these services. And anytime there's a monopoly, automatically, just economically speaking, value goes down, quality goes down. There's no incentive for efficiency, effectiveness, accountability, or to ever improve. So there's a big hurdle here that a lot of people don't even realize. And, if we want to talk about economics and logic, I mean, you have to be consistent, right? Like you can't just say, well, this service is, just like any other service. Law enforcement is just like any other service. I mean, we voluntarily pay for our phone bill, for our electricity bill, yet this service by law enforcement is involuntarily extracted with our tax dollars. So again, this makes it even more important, even more paramount for us to have transparency and have accountability. But what you're touching on, Chris, is very important to also point out, because these people are fallible, and just because they are funded by our tax dollars doesn't mean that they're perfect. It doesn't mean that we can't criticize these services.
Harry, go ahead.
Oh, I will say, like, it's been my experience that you never really want to tell the cops that, you fund their paycheck. Don't tell them that. Okay. They really, really hate that. But
true.
As you see, like, also, like, technology is getting better. Like, I think we talked before the show about technology getting better and faster. You see, like, the stories of cops doing this was like really prevalent before Rodney King, and especially in the 80s of police enforcement. And now that's with the rise of camera phones and more people having dashboard camera. It just kind of, you feel like it just brings like it it just became easier now for everyone to help police the police with those?
Yes and no. And that's a great question, Harry. And I actually struggle with this very topic quite frequently. Yes, we have more accessibility to cameras. That's a good thing. We could upload any of these videos and even, live stream them in many cases. So that's a great thing. Now, on the flip side of that, using my reference to Rodney King earlier, that was a one-time thing that people hadn't seen, if ever, in their lives. And because somebody happened to have a video camera and was across the street in a parking lot filming that, it was one of these events that, again, nobody had seen, so it caused massive outrage. Nowadays, I wonder and I worry that organizations like ours, who are constantly focusing on and disseminating this type of information, these viral videos, if we're doing a disservice to the cause and to society by desensitizing people to a lot of this violence.
Yeah, I a lot of these, I'm just kind of like, I just can't watch this again. And I guess that's maybe not the right, because you really should see it. But I think you've touched on something there. I don't know. I don't have a single black friend in my life that says anything other than there's a problem between black people and police, and they have a personal story. Like, and when I hear, oh, well, white people get killed more often and blah, well, yeah, we're like 60% of the population. So, like, proportionately, it affects the black community more. I mean, what really started my journey from just being like, if you're in trouble as a child, you go and speak to the cop, and here's your DARE t-shirt, to, oh, maybe we should rethink some of this stuff, is Harry saying to me, you don't understand. When I get in the car, I think about it differently. Like, how am I getting home? When I'm in the passenger seat, they ask for my ID, but not my wife, who is white. Like, there's differences. There's interactions that he talked about. Then, the pat down with Miss Pat and Dion, like, they're to my profession, to my friends like Abdul, like, there is just every single person I know has a story. So it's hard to know, oh, because this doesn't personally impact me and I've never experienced it, I'm going to dismiss the stories of an entire race of people. Can you talk about that idea that this is not a problem and those people are just making too much noise? Because that's really the attitude of a lot of, right-leaning people, is that they're just indoctrinated with critical race theory. Their experiences don't matter. It's just them believing the voodoo of Jesse Jackson or something. Yeah.
Well, to be clear, police violence affects all people, all ages, all colors, all creeds. It literally, we cover stories. It doesn't matter who you are, right? Anybody's susceptible to state violence. With that said, of course, yes, black people have a disproportionately, higher rate of being arrested, having encounters with police, being harassed by police. I don't think there's any debate there from anybody who seriously, objectively takes a look at all this. So yeah, it's a problem. To continue on with some of these stats, 64 people were killed during the George Floyd trial, right? So, and considering that Derek Chauvin was only the 8th officer to be convicted of on-duty murder since 2005. Wow. It should be a red flag, right? And so to say that, this is just a couple, a small demographic of people who are making a lot of noise, it's just inaccurate. I feel like it's probably cognitive dissonance, probably some Stockholm syndrome. It's just easier to sweep this stuff under the rug. And to be completely honest, it's just indoctrination, right? A lot of these people on the right have a serious case of authority worship. So, anything that police do, they're gonna praise it, they're gonna worship it, and they're gonna always try to find some type of justification to defend police violence. It's a sad, and again, going back to my point from earlier, these are the same people who claim that they care about America and Americans, yet they're the first people to also justify any police violence.
Harry, Reinhold, Trisha, jump in here. What do you want to bring up next?
I wanted to bring up what we think part of the problems are, because right now, we know that there's this issue going on, and we've had a history of over policing in certain communities. But really, what I see is more that we, as a society, for a lot of people in society, have almost lionized the police to the point where they expect perfection and savior attitude towards those people, to the police. So they have a hard time believing that the police might have made a mistake or done something wrong. But what I find more interesting is I think we're expecting the police to do too much, to be involved in every interaction and every law break and every situation, and trying to mediate between people who are having domestic disagreements or jaywalking, or just all this small non stuff that's not really affecting people, right? So I think that the real part of the solution would be to pull back some of that they're doing. But I'm just wondering if that's something everybody else believes or sees, that we're just expecting too much of the police in this case. And there's obviously going to be people who err and make mistakes because they're just not getting their proper training to do that.
I'm going to jump in here because this actually leads to a question that I want to ask Jason. When you listen to serious conservatives and they talk about, New York City, the bad old days of New York City, 2,000 murders in a year in the 70s, 80s, and the crack epidemic. And Giuliani comes in and introduces broken windows. And the theory of policing in broken windows in New York City and stop and frisk is that when you bust people for the petty crimes like jaywalking, you end up reducing overall crime. Why is that a problem? Why do you consider that to be wrong?
Yeah, I mean, coming from a libertarian perspective, right? I believe so. I mean, these are there's so many levels to this answer, but these are generally victimless infractions that both you and Reinhold are speaking on, right? So the fact that the state is claiming this authority to extort citizens for these infractions that don't actually include a victim, I think is probably the first thing that we need to address and talk about. And to jump back here on Reinhold's point and question, I did an interview a couple weeks ago with a police officer, and it actually went swimmingly well. We both actually learned a lot from each other. We agreed on many points. And one of the points that we agreed on was the fact that there are so many law enforcement officers in this country that, yes, the overwhelming majority don't break the laws. The overwhelming majority don't violate our rights. But, of course, there are the small fraction of people who do, and who have either taken the employment as a law enforcement officer to violate our rights and have this complex and this ego, or they have other agendas and objectives. But to me, ultimately, what this comes back to, and I'd love to talk about this maybe a little bit more, because some of this stuff is more symptoms of a larger problem, and that problem is the economic issue that most people, including Black Lives Matter, do not want to address or talk about here. And of course, reform is a worthy idea, and I certainly support any type of reform efforts. But at the end of the day, again, this is a product that's involuntarily contracted with us, right? We've never signed any contracts with these people. So to me, yes, they have all the incentive in the world to create revenue and to generate revenue, because look, we never signed up for this. They're going to try to make a buck through, these victimless infractions anytime and any way they can. So yeah, to me, the broken windows theory, it's problematic. It's absolutely problematic. That's a violation of our rights, a number of them. And, at the end of the day, all it does is deepen the divide between the people who claim to be serving and protecting society and the public.
All right, let me put on my John Stossel hat here, right, and counter you with, so what about the morality of it? What are you talking about with contracts? If it means that, my stuff isn't stolen, my family is safe, and these tactics work, then who cares?
Well, Sure, but then they're also kicking in people's doors at 3 a.m. and throwing flashbangs in, children's cribs for non-existent drugs, and sometimes even the wrong addresses. So there's a lot of blowback, I guess you could say, a lot of consequences to these policies, to this monopoly on violence, monopoly on the claim legal use of force, which police claim that they have. So I would suggest that decentralized private, of course, that's a taboo word, right? Nobody likes, on the left, private. Ooh, that's a crazy one. But I would say decentralized community-based security protection services will be the only solution going forward to anybody who really cares about being logically consistent or just looking at the evidence, right? Because we've tried reform since you could go all the way back to 1886, the Haymarket Massacre. That was the very first police brutality protest. So 120 years now plus, we've been protesting police and begging for legislators to create some type of meaningful change and reform. Yet that doesn't happen. So, as far as I'm concerned, there are solutions. The solution is decentralized. And while defunding does have some merits, the actual legitimate solution, as far as morally and pragmatically, is to decentralize.
Okay, so you're not necessarily. Can you explain defund the police to me and our listeners? Because I think a lot of our listeners there, we're first in the Apple charts when you search libertarian, so we get a lot of new people. They're not as down the train as the five of us are, and they're not paying as much of attention, right? So when you hear defund the police, well, it goes back to kind of that last question, like, well, then who's going to come out when I call 911? Like, how would that work? I don't understand the concept. And once you've explained the concept, can you give your personal opinion on it, please?
Yeah. So defunding the police, again, it has some merit. It's not completely devoid of any type of logic, right? We actually just came across a study. So if U.S. police were their own country, they would be the third highest funded army in the world. So, considering that we have MRAP tanks in our streets doing these drug raids, and a whole host of other, grenade launchers, sniper rifles, the whole 1033 program, which is the Department of Defense, basically handing down excess supplies and equipment to local police departments. It's a big problem, I would say. Of course, that whole concept of defunding the police turned into a rally cry for BLM. And it's not something I'm completely opposed to, but I do believe that it's short-sighted. I do believe it falls into the category of reform when ultimately, again, we've been trying reform for 120 plus years here. So the concept that I'm talking about is, again, it's a decentralized. So people have this crazy mentality and idea, which I would say comes from public school indoctrination, that if we were to change any aspect of law enforcement or completely get rid of the monopoly on law enforcement, that all of a sudden there would just be chaos and lawlessness in the streets. And look, hey, I can't speculate one way or another if that would be the case or not. But I do know that the market would fill that void, that there would be a place and there would be incentive for private actors, private companies to fill that void with these security protection services, much like we already see now in Detroit with Mr. Dale Brown, who's a close friend of mine. He's the commander at the Detroit Threat Management Center, and he's been around for 20 plus years now. Completely different technique and strategy compared to what law enforcement conveys. And he's never had any type of jail time problems with him or his employees, and none of his clients have ever had any harm or deaths. So this guy is the shining example of exactly what decentralized private security companies could be. And if any of your audience is actually looking for more information about that, I would suggest researching Dale Brown Threat Management Cop Block. There's been a number of different organizations who have interviewed Dale over the years, Reason, Vice, a whole bunch of others. But in my opinion, the Cop Block interview and the Cop Block video is the best one to really get a grasp on his services and what he does.
Yeah, I can throw that in the show notes. I'll grab that from you. What are some other examples of your vision of a decentralized police? Like, I mean, isn't every agency independent? The Plainfield Police Department's different than the Avon Police Department is different than the Indianapolis Police Department. Like, isn't that decentralization? It's not like the Army where there's one centralized army. So what do you mean by decentralized?
Yeah, good question. Well, again, have you voluntarily paid for any of these services in your community for law enforcement? Has that been something that you've
pay my taxes? I mean, I was born in America. I live in this city. I chose Southport. I pay my taxes, Jason.
Paying your taxes voluntarily and having them extracted involuntarily, there's a little bit of a difference there. And I would say the difference is, again, there's incentive, right? The incentive is all the world of difference. And if there's incentive to actually win the community's dollar by people who are voting with their dollar, then, we're going to have a much more succinct community as far as what their values and wishes and standards are. So I guess that might be confusing, right? But if you think of it as like any type of service, and law enforcement is ultimately at the end of the day, it's just a service. And
right. So you're saying like if the people of Plainfield, Indiana, my hometown, have an excessively abusive police force, which we did not growing up. They did a fine job, to my knowledge, right? But let's say we've got a lot of problems with these people. You can't necessarily do much about it because they've monopolized the violence. So you're saying we have several different services that a town can choose from that would then voluntarily contract with a policing agency, and they can be fired. It's much more elastic and changeable, and they put customer service ahead of monopolizing the violence.
Correct. Yeah, there's a middleman right now, and that middleman is called government. And, if we want any type of form, we basically have to beg and grovel or go through the legal process, perhaps create a civilian oversight committee, which generally are pretty useless in the bigger scheme of things. But yeah, basically what I'm saying is rather than jumping through all these hoops, rather than expecting and hoping and praying that our local government officials might change something, they might, give the local police department a little less money so they have, one less MRAP tank or something. Instead, we would just fund these services that we would actually want to see in our society. And yes, Chris, you're absolutely right. We vote with our dollars every day with every type of product and service that we just decide to voluntarily participate with. So we would do the same thing within our communities. And this alone is such a departure from what we have today, right? Right now, we have these law enforcement officers who, let's be fair here, there's a lot of ego involved in police culture. There's a lot of, they expect you to obey and respect their authority. They expect you to be subservient to their authority. They will pull you over and harass you and ask you where you're going, ask you a bunch of unnecessary questions. So what I'm suggesting looks a lot different from all of that, right? If somebody were in the community to be harassed by a decentralized security and protection service, we'd get together, we'd congregate, we'd put our minds together and say, look, like my son was harassed while he was driving home. We don't want to fund this group anymore, this organization. There's no incentive for us to continue paying for them. Let's get somebody else in here who isn't going to violate our rights, somebody else who's not going to harass our kids. And, it's going to look a lot different, basically, is what I'm saying. And I think we've been so acclimated and so normalized to what police is now that we almost can't envision a whole different protection security service that would be feasible in our society.
This is I'm a big fan of school choice, and I'm here in Indianapolis with, when the great Mitch Daniels was governor and had Tony Bennett, and there was, Bart Peterson, and the Democrat as mayor, and starting charter schools, and the Friedman Foundation's located here, the Lumina Foundation. Like, this is a hotbed of school choice activity, and the argument has always been, we're not anti-teacher. We're pro-teacher because we want to give them higher wages and more choices for work opportunity, as opposed to having one administration that can do to you whatever they like. And the pro-choice, or the pro-school choice, I should say, line is much more beneficial to teachers. So the same argument essentially is what you're saying would apply to police officers. It's not that you're abolishing police and they would be out of a job. They'd have more job opportunities. So is the head of police the police not necessarily anti-police, but actually wants a more humane system for both the police officer and the citizen?
Yeah, I think that's safe to say. And I think I'm also just rational, right? Because there's this idea, from some libertarians that, hey, like, I have my AR, you have your AK, like, we could just protect our community ourselves. Well, that sounds great in theory, and sure, if it's a small enough community, it might be possible. But at the same time, the division of labor is something that I value, right? Like, I'm not necessarily a security guard. I don't really have the physique to really seem intimidating. Some of my, shooting skills are on point, but ultimately that's not exactly what we're trying to accomplish here. So, I believe that we would, as a society, as a community, value these protection security services. And I do believe there would be a hole or a void for that hole in society, that, police, if they did step away, or if we even had the opportunity to just opt out of their services and they were to take care of some of the legal land legalese, that would probably be, again, more beneficial, more advantageous. But yeah, it's all the difference between bottom up to rather than top down. And I think most libertarian anarchists could kind of see the utility there.
Yeah, I mean, and Tricia, I'll let you propose the next topic, and maybe you want to answer this, but I genuinely worry about my friends that are police officers right now. I genuinely worry about their mental health. I worry about their physical safety. I do worry about the environment and the attitude towards police. And I'm in a traffic stop 2 or 3 years ago, and the police officer going to do a podcast, and it's at night, and I get pulled over for speeding, and I'm fumbling for my registration down between the seats, and he treats me like I'm about to shoot him in the face. Like, that level of fear that someone would live through every single day, like, that's horrible for a police officer. There's no wonder that they're having such a hard time. Like, what libertarians want to do is take the empathetic position towards those people as well as the citizens that they're protecting, because that level of amped up, like, am I wrong? Like, you're laughing, but why are you laughing at me, Tricia?
Well, I think Harry had something to say, because I do understand part of your point, but I think he might have disagreed with one of your points too.
Well, no, is the idea that if the cop is so afraid they're going to get shot in the face for walking up someone's car, then why did you pull them over for speeding? You could send them a ticket. You have that person's address. The moment you pull that plate, you know where this car goes. You know where this car is supposed to go.
Great point.
You're that and there's people that will walk up to people's car every day, all day, never worry about getting shot in the face. It's called Chick-fil-A. They do it all the freaking time. Okay, never.
Well, Chick-fil-A also isn't, they're not road pirates extorting people for victimless.
Well, that's a huge part of why these stops take place, is because they can't, like, here in Indiana, we have home rule. So if you want to raise your taxes as a local of town, city, state, county, you have to go to the state legislature, which is full of Trump Republicans who are not going to give you a tax increase. And so the only way that they can legally make up revenue is by issuing a lot of tickets, cracking down on a lot of so it becomes predatory.
Right. So you can speed in your own county. They won't really pull you over that much. But the moment you cross into a different jurisdiction, but you'll probably get pulled over for speeding. So yeah, that's a little top tip for speeding in Indiana.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the whole concept that all cops are bastards, all cops are bad, it's complicated, right? There's a lot of nuance to that conversation. I'd love to get into it, but I think ultimately what Chris touched on is important to recognize, right? Like, all cops are bastards. That's a very collectivist mindset that, puts a whole group of people into this whole category. I try to treat them as individuals. That's why I have my own cop friends. That's why I never turned down the opportunity to do an interview with a law enforcement officer. So yeah, it is important to distinguish that, right? Because we as libertarians should view these people as individuals. Now, does that change the fact that they decided to voluntarily sign up for enforcing victimless laws for corrupt politicians on peaceful people? No, that doesn't change that fact, and that's immoral. The institution itself is immoral. That's the problem. But, I think you're right, Chris. We do need to address and look at these people as individuals, because some of these people get into this profession with the right intentions, right? They really want to do some good in their community, and they believe that's the path forward to doing it.
And when you talk to police officers, they do a lot of good in their community, and that stuff never gets highlighted. And it gets drowned out by a lot of these bad apples. But what you're touching on is one bad apple spoils the whole bunch. The system is predatory. They've chosen this, and I agree with all that. I mean, I'm playing intentionally obtuse today to try and get at the questions that I think most people ask. But this is one concern that I have with the police accountability movement, is that we alienate the very people that I think would be on our side. And, the thing that I've learned over, 15 years of working in the libertarian movement, and I've just learned that the people that are most often with us are the people that draw a government paycheck. It's the teachers. It's the guy that is the treasurer at some division in the Indiana state, the people who interact. The biggest group of people on our 100,000 likes Facebook page is the military. It is government employees. It is, I think that we have missed an opportunity in a lot of ways to reach out to police officers, and we don't do what the Keene folks have done, which is take your local cop out to lunch and have them think about people's rights, have them think about what's going on, and maybe do their job differently or choose a different career. And not because anytime anybody feels like they're under attack and they're in that crouched down position of defensiveness, that's not good. And it's especially not good when they're the vanguard of the state with a monopolization on violence. And I just think that that's a missed opportunity in a lot of ways. To jump back to the decentralized conversation, the Elastic Giraffe on YouTube says, would private security firms be authorized to make arrests? What police can do legally with probable cause as part of that monopoly on violence would be considered kidnapping in the private sector. Now, in the second part, he makes a point, like, often we see the government doing things that we'd be locked up for, especially police officers. But when you're talking about hiring a decentralized police force, let's say 60% of the town of Plainfield votes in a voluntary police force, but that still leaves the 40% in the minority that did not voluntarily associate. Like, I know we're getting way deep into the anarchist weeds here, Trisha, but Trisha, our resident anarchist, Harry's an anarchist, Jason, I assume, is an anarchist. How does that get sorted out? What if I'm in the minority of the people that didn't voluntarily choose that? How would that work?
Right. I can't say that we have a perfect system. And
what?
To be clear, well, it's infinitely better than what we have now, right? But we have consent involved, which is crucial. It's very important. So yeah, but
yeah, I'm going to give you an out. There's no perfect way to deal with imperfect people and groups of people, right? Like that's why I'm a borderline anarchist, agorist, Trisha says, but there's still like that little part of it where people are just 10% of the population is crazy, and we got to deal with them. Like there has to be a way to deal. Like 10% of any audience I've ever managed is just crazy and violent and terrible and demented, and we need some way to deal with them. So what I like about what you've proposed is that there is still a way to deal with them. There still are laws in a voluntary society. It's not just anarchy, Trisha.
Well, I would say the other 90% of human beings act with rational self-interest. So
Yeah.
that's a pretty good majority.
So that 90% shouldn't be locked down because 10% is crazy.
Right. And what happens is we generally elect 10% to a place called Washington, D.C.
True.
Yeah.
Which is another point. I know that we had talked about decentralizing, which is always a good thing. And in the end, that's really an anarchist idea, bring it down to the individual. But I think that local police forces have become federalized. I mean, I don't think we talked about what the federal government does with police. I mean, they've helped to militarize them with what they give them.
Yeah, what the heck, Jason? I go to the Johnson County Fair 2 years ago, and there's a rainbow-colored tank. It's like your local Pride Parade has an MRAP wrapped in rainbow colors. We're just your friendly local militarized police department. How did that happen? Why does last year during the protests there was a rumor that started going around Greenwood near the area. There's a mall there, very white suburban, lower to middle class town. They have 2 MRAPs that nobody knew about, but when it started going viral on Facebook that they are about to invade the Greenwood Park Mall and Black Lives Matter and the rioters are going to hit them next, all of a sudden, we've got MRAPs rolling on the.
Chris tripped his.
Sorry.
There we go.
Yeah, all of a sudden, Black Lives Matter is about to invade the Greenwood Park Mall, and they have 2 giant tanks. I mean, these are like 15 feet tall, giant tires. They're 6 feet tall. Like, this town of 100,000 people does not need 2 tanks. What the heck?
Yeah, it's actually a very simple explanation. It's called the DoD 1033 program, which started under Obama, transferring unused military equipment from places like Iraq and Afghanistan to local police departments. And, what's funny is that the Black Lives Matter crowd, a lot of our friends on the left, they felt like they had to do something to get Trump out of office. So majority of them voted for Biden, thinking that he would be the better alternative, especially in the realm of police accountability. But the problem is that the 1033 program transfers are actually accelerating under Biden as of the past 3 months. So, Trump was actually ramping it down, and it's ramping back up again. So,
wait,
once
that
again,
doesn't
the Black
fit my
Lives Matter
preconceived
guy.
notions.
We're gonna get snowballed.
Am I muted?
Right.
So you're saying that Joe Biden, the guy that basically started the drug war, is the friend of the liberal, the friend of the progressive, I should say, because we're taking liberal back, is accelerating the program and isn't for civil rights?
That's correct, my friend. Yeah, that's what the stats are indicating from the past 3 months now. Actually, probably 4 months as of June.
Yeah. Oh, it's something I think we've known for 4 or 5 decades. But with Joe Biden's always been pro police, putting people in prison for crimes. But I kind of wanted to play devil advocate, if you don't mind here. We're talking about decentralizing police, having the private people doing the police. Now, we've had that in the past in this country, and it didn't always turn out well. Is there, we can just go back to the Pinkertons, for example, right? And I know in San Francisco, I think they still had it on the books that you could have private police forces that you could subscribe to and help.
Right. Yeah, you're correct about that.
That was in the 80s, I think. It was still going on there. There was actually a movie about it. So how do we deal with the problems that are going to be introduced with having a private police force? Because it's not like it's going to be a utopian panacea when this happens, right?
Right. No, and that's a very good point. And I think Chris touched on that briefly too. And it was in my head, 1,000 other things. I kind of got sidetracked there. But I think it is important to, there's a distinction here when we talk about decentralized security and protection services, right? So to me, in my journey as an anarchist, it's always been important to have the blueprints of what a free society would look like. How is that going to function? What are the ins and outs? So 2 distinctions, right? what does it look like in a free society? And I think largely about almost everything I've talked about, it's towards that future of what it would look like when people finally understand that authority is just a concept. Acclaimed authority is just a concept. It doesn't actually exist. So I think once we get to that point, we could actually start to make some progress as a species. But unfortunately, we're not there yet. So yeah, we do need to take into account what it would look like applicable to today's society. And honestly, I don't have that answer. I don't know how it would integrate into today's communities, today's society. But I do believe, talking with my law enforcement friend who I did an interview with a couple of weeks back, that it seems like it would be beneficial if communities at the very least had an option to consent to either opting in or out of law enforcement services, and then being able to hire these third-party private entities for their communities. And in that we can't decentralize even smaller groups. Let's say you have your neighborhood or your HOA or whatever, and you guys all come to a certain agreement about these types of things. To me, that's not a perfect system, of course, but it is a step in the right direction. And again, consent makes a world of difference when it comes to allocating our tax dollars. So
yeah, Brian writes, take a close look at South Africa and who can afford private security and who can't. And I think that's an important point when it comes to the idea that I'm okay with the idea of a town choosing to centralize a monopoly for services for all, because of the ability to care for the poor. I mean, if you're just going full private security and you've got to hire your own security, and that's like, you can kind of do that for trash pickup, right? But security and being able to call 911, I just don't know that people will ever accept that as a solution. But I think you've touched on an important point in that unless you start making moves in that direction, you don't have the innovation. We don't have innovation, and we don't have movement, and we don't have ideas, and we don't have creative thought towards this because we're stuck in a mindset of this is what we have always done and this is what we will always do. And the thing about the human species is that it is incredibly innovative, and it is always finding new solutions to make things better, and that growth is set back by this monopolization on force. All right. Jason Bassler, please, shameless self-promotion time. Tell us where we can see some of these interviews and follow you, and how can people follow your work and get engaged with it?
Yeah, so thanks again for the opportunity to be on with you guys. So you can follow me on Twitter, Jason Bassler1. I'm also on Minds, MeWe, Float, and Telegram. The Free Thought Project and Police the Police are literally on every social media platform you could think of. I believe we post on 15 different social media platforms on a daily basis. If you go to thefreethoughtproject.com, you could sign up for our newsletter. You could check out our podcasts from there. We're also on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, Podbean. A lot of great interviews with former police officers, current police officers, and a whole array of different guests. There's also an opportunity on our Free Thought Project website to either donate or subscribe. We need all the help we can get. As Chris touched on earlier in the show, in late 2018, we lost 6 million fans due to Facebook and Twitter removing our pages and accounts on the same day. So it's been quite a rebuilding process. They've taken us down several times since then. We're not going to stop, but we need all the help we can get.
Rat bastards! I swear to God, these it's people kind of didn't believe it when I posted something yesterday. Here, I'll show it to you. We are Libertarians has been taken down off of Facebook. Our Facebook group has been deleted. Our page of 100,000 people is lucky to get 250 to 500 impressions a post. You can't. Our Instagram is no longer showing up in feeds. That stopped last year. You have to type my full name exactly to get me in Twitter. We're totally throttled on YouTube and Twitter. I mean, it's just. I wonder, Jason, if there's like a group, a third party. I will not be surprised if we find a third party is feeding our names to all of these people going, just search We Are Libertarians, search Free Thought, anything attached to Jason Bassler or Chris Spangle, because I tried to start a Twitter for a history of modern politics. It's the most benign thing. I'm going to post links to the podcast for a history podcast that is not edgy. Sorry, this is spam. You're clearly a bot. We can't have you on this platform. There's no recourse. I can't. So, okay, all right. But it's because it's attached to my name, I think. So, I don't know. It sucks. But this is the kind of news that they want you to have. I am an extremist, and you are an extremist with these horrible ideas, and we're fake news. But this is the Facebook suggested news from Us Weekly. Kim Kardashian breaks silence on what led to Kanye split. That's the official news that they'd like you to read. So make sure you go to freethoughtproject.com. And while you're at it, wearelibertarians.com and support all of our shows. So very good. Jason, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you guys for having me on. Appreciate it.
And we will be back here in just a moment. We're going to talk about Dr. Fauci. I'm going to let Reinhold talk and just piss all of you off. All right, stay tuned. Thanks so much, Jason.
You can't just throw a question at me at the end there, man. I wanted to answer that damn question about.
Well, go ahead. Okay. Go ahead. I will edit. I will edit this in. No. It's okay. If you want to keep going, we can keep going. I can just edit this in.
It was great. That means it was a good conversation.
All right. Well, we'll have you back, and we'll talk about that when the next great zuckening happens, and we all get caught up in it again. Hit me up, and we'll have that conversation.
That actually, that was the last thing I was going to say there is that if anybody, I think we could easily talk on this subject for at least 2 hours. So that's my other specialty, when I'm not doing the police accountability interviews, it's the censorship stuff.
Yeah, so absolutely.
I'd love to talk shop on that.
All right, man. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, guys. Yeah. Enjoy the day, guys.
Hey, take care. Okay. Let me go to my Instapaper here. That was good. Okay. And then this is going to be quick. We don't need to spend all day on this stuff.
You want me to make heads explode? Is that what you're saying?
No. Listen, I want Trisha and I want Dennis. I want you guys to be yourselves. And Harry, I don't think you care. But, say what you think. Don't be nice. Let's see.
All right. Do I got time to hit the banyo real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sweet.
I'm just going to mute us all and let's just take 30 seconds. Just breathe. Right. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm so sorry. But sometimes you just need to have a little moment of zen. Okay. Sorry to our YouTube viewers. I know this just skip like a minute or two here. We won't always take a break, but there's ads that play in this part.
Our YouTube viewers can go take a break too. They can go get something to refresh themselves and maybe take another shot so they can start talking crazy somewhere.
See.
I think Harry's working on his purple wall right now.
I know.
I have so many plans for background things. I just have not got to them yet.
Mom and Dad left Costa Rica, 1971.
Who doesn't?
1990, they opened the Irasu. When the pandemic hit, pickup and delivery was still viable, and that kept us afloat. Keeping our diners informed on Google was so important. The support from our customers, it honestly kept us going. I will always be grateful for that.
There's a lot.
Okay.
You guys haven't found my hidden book yet.
You
There's something special back here.
It's hard because it's not fully zoomed in. I have one. I have one of those. Right. Reinhold, big malice hater.
That's a weird thing to say since I own his last book, but people can assume and hear what they want to hear because of their biases. That's fine with me.
Trisha, I have one.
People are who they are.
Is that Tribulation Force? Is that your hidden book?
No. This one is my own special authored piece of art.
See, it's so blurry I can't tell. I have one of those. It's How to Deal with a Big Penis. It was.
I have the same book.
Do you? It's like red and like thin. Ironically, the Big Penis book is thin. Oh, hold on.
But you mean dealing with it in a different way than he means dealing with it, right?
I'm surprised.
I had a friend of mine.
Oh Lord. Is that a signed copy?
With my dick, if you.
Right.
Are you wearing a scarf?
We're gonna get banned on Twitch. Now I'm an internet doctor. All right.
You have as much cred as most of them do too.
Do you remember when Obama took pictures with the doctors passing the Affordable Care Act, and they were just people with white coats, and the conservatives' heads exploded? Do you remember that?
Man, no. I think I was too busy watching my healthcare going down the
yeah.
All right. Okay, you guys ready?
Sure.
Do you want me to send John a copy? What is your book? Can you get it?
Nope. Somebody has to find it.
Okay.
I'm going to make mention of it on my show.
Okay.
And then when they do, I'll open it up for the next episode.
Darla, I would say that like Reinhold, I won't speak for him, but my own personal feelings on Malice is that he's very intelligent. He's very good at what he does. I think he has a shtick, and he's really drilling into that shtick. And sometimes that becomes a little boring. But I did buy the new anarchist book. I am going to read it, and it is a good thing that for all of our sometimes personal dislike of the paleo-libertarian crowd, a lot of that comes from how they treat us. And I don't like paleo-libertarians because I have to talk to them every day, and their personalities usually are atrocious. And, but it's a good thing that Dave Smith goes on Joe Rogan. It's a good thing that Michael Malice is at number one. Like, that all helps all of us. So I personally don't take I think there's some definite problems. Like, the dark joke thing that's going on right now is really ugly. There's stuff like that we disagree with. But overall, when 500 people show up to an LP convention in Pennsylvania, that's a good thing, because everybody starts somewhere. And, this thing's growing across the board for everybody. And it all sorts itself out in the end. And we have a definite voice. And our take here at We Are Libertarians is that everybody should have a voice, and you can sort it out later. I'm against the cancel culture shit, which is why I don't like a lot of paleo-libertarians, because why we like you, Darla, is that you listen to the show, you engage with us, you have a conversation with us, and treat us with respect. And we do the same to you, hopefully. So there's that's how it should be, right? But a lot of people don't have that same thing. Like, if you're on the other side of the paleo-libertarian crowd, it's not fun usually. But we're not going to talk about it as a show topic, because we're trying to trend towards a broad audience. He's paleo-libertarian. He's catering to monarchists and the paleo-libertarian crowd. That's his bread and butter. He is an anarchist, but that's definitely who they're trending to. You want more juice? Okay, I'll get you more juice. Sorry, my associate producer. Talk amongst yourselves. Reinhold, you can fill 30 seconds.
Well, I can just jump in here and say on Michael Malice is that I like reading some of the stuff he says, but I don't see him as the ultimate authority and greatest god of all libertarianism, and we should all bow down and believe everything he says and not find him point out the critical mistakes and things that he says that are wrong. He's a human being. He's doing his thing. He gets some things right. He gets some things wrong. I'm not going to lionize him and treat him as a god. He's just a guy. You know, other people have other ideas. Other people have other beliefs. I'm going to listen to all of them, and I'm going to inform myself based off of that. And that's the worst. That's the thing I hate most about the libertarian movement right now is there's a lot of people who are engaged in a cult of personality who will glom onto one individual or one person, you know, group of people, and they're the people. And if you say anything negative or anything bad about them, even if it's valid, even if it's good criticism they should be taking, you're the enemy. You should be destroyed. You're not really a libertarian. You should be kicked out of the movement. You should just go join the Democratic Party. You know, stuff like that I see all the time just because I don't engage in that.
I think I agree with you on that, Dennis. Like hero worship on you know, every part of the libertarian spectrum is really dangerous. It's dangerous for all people, but especially for people that claim to be individualists. We've just gone around to this collective idea that we're going to worship somebody that we give authority to, because obviously we're saying that everything they say is right. And if I disagree, then they have the authority over me that I'm wrong. And, you know, I have plenty of, I would consider like anarchist heroes, but there's times when I'm like, wow, that was really wrong. That doesn't mean I have any less respect for them. I just, you know, I'm my own president. I'm the master of my universe and my domain and my single little individuality. And so I just don't look outside of myself for somebody to tell me what ultimate truth is. You know, I'm going to read it. And if it makes sense to me, and maybe sometimes they're right and I'm wrong, but it's so weird when you leave this idea that the state is always right, or the state has, you know, the right to do everything that they do, and you become an individualist, and then you just give that same power back to somebody that wrote a book or something. I don't know if that makes sense, but that was kind of my journey to where you are.
It's definitely true. You've got to be able to take all that information, and you may disagree with some. I may disagree with something Michael Malice says in his book, but then a year or two later, I may rethink about it, and I might agree, or I might agree with something I read in it, and then I think about it a year or two later, and I go, no, I don't agree with that.
Reinhold is the Anthony Fauci of this show. All right, let's get back to the show. We just like the inside baseball stuff. I'll throw this part in the Patreon for people to listen to. But you know, Darla, like the inside baseball stuff, I'm just not doing that anymore. I don't think people know who Michael Malice is, or you know, like
I don't.
You know, like Harry doesn't even know. So I'd rather talk about police accountability and things that your average person is talking about instead of the movement stuff anymore, because I'm just tired of you people. And the reality is that as my life, I have, you know, a soon-to-be wife, and she has a daughter, and I'm starting 2 businesses, basically. I'm working a full-time job. I just don't have time to keep up with. I don't have time to spend all day on Facebook following who's mad at who about what, and going to Libertarian Party stuff. And it's like, I'm just a regular dude who's trying to make people think about the news in a different way towards a libertarian direction. And I'm just not servicing the libertarian movement in the same way as I used to. You know, it's just not worth it. You people are not worth it. All right, here we go.
Especially how much they serve you back, right?
Right. All right. Yeah, exactly. Right. Like the last year's been nothing but grief. So, I'm going to keep doing this show. I'm going to keep doing Liberty Explained. I'm going to keep growing the We Are Libertarians network. But, like, talking about this stuff is just stupid. You know? It's just dumb to me. All right, here we go. Welcome back to the Chris Spangle Show. My name is Chris Spangle. Joined here by Harry Price, Reinhold, and the host of Gingerarchy, Trisha Stewart-Mann. Please go check out. If you were to say, like, what, other than the ones I've been on, but if you were to say, like, all right, go listen to this one episode right now, what would you say your favorite one in your feed is, Trisha?
Well, it's always generally the one that's on the forefront of my thought, which is actually the last episode I did with Mike Mahary, partially because it interests me so much, but he really gave the scope of faith and anarchy and libertarianism, and we kind of like used that to look through the lens of our lives, and it was just really interesting. He had some philosophy in there, real practical use, fun. He's a funny guy. So that was one of my most enjoyable shows I've done in a while. But I might say that after the next one.
Do you want to give us a hint? Who's next?
I'm having one of my favorite modern day libertarians on, Spike Cohen. We'll be doing a show on Monday, so hopefully we'll get that up Monday night.
Very good. Very good. And please go listen to all of the shows on the We Are Libertarians network. It is there's 13 different shows. You can find them all just by searching We Are Libertarians in your podcast app. Subscribe to them all. We've got, Brian teaching people the basics, talking to a lot of interesting people. I'm just not doing interviews anymore because every time I interview somebody, Brian's like, "Oh yeah, I've got that. I'm talking to them next week. Their show airs now." I'm like, "All right." And then we got like all kinds of weird shit with Rimzo. Like Trisha, you love Rimzo's show. You talk about all the time about how great it is off the run,
it's funny. Run. Like it's entertaining. There's a lot of entertainment there. Yeah.
Yeah. So give a recommendation of a good on the run episode with Rimzo Martinez that you just really were like, everybody should hear this.
Oh, the one with Trisha Stewart Mann.
All right. So let's get to it. I retired from the pandemic like in November, January. Like I had that luxury. And I feel like Anthony Fauci for both sides has become an avatar. I don't know what a lot of people are going to do when everybody's ready to move on from the pandemic, and some of these people have based their personalities on it. I mean, you made the comment on my stuff, Reinhold, that people didn't talk about the 1918 flu on purpose.
Right. I mean, it was so what happened after the 1918 flu was such a horrible situation, and a lot of stuff happened in there. And then you find out that, for years and years, there's no discussion about it. There's no talk about it. There's one book written about it. I think Grapes of Wrath, I think was what it was. And it was like they were just trying to push it out of the social conscious mind. And I think that we're seeing that happen. We're going to see that happen here is that people it was such a traumatic time for a lot of different reasons that people just don't want to talk about it or think about it anymore. They want to get back to their lives. So you can't do that if you just keep talking about it all the time. It's like, it's kind of similar to what happened in 9/11. After a certain point in time, people just don't want to talk about it anymore.
But I will say that a lot of libertarians are exactly right, and Trisha, in that this was one of the greatest invasions of liberty into our daily lives. You personally suffered a lot through it. People like Hody and many other people on our team, had a lot of hardships in employment and work, and it was a disaster. I mean, it was legit. The lockdowns. Okay, we've always made this distinction, right? Like, there's people's behavior due to a pandemic, and that is one thing. And then there is government action, and that's a different thing. And I got into an argument with one of my Instagram followers who was saying that that's an unprincipled stance because those people are just giving in to public pressure, and the media and public pressure are just as bad as government action, and we need to fight it. And you're not a libertarian if you wear a mask or if you are like take science seriously or whatever. And I go, do you understand libertarianism at all? Like, government lockdowns are the problem. Jeff Bennett in Fresno, California, having his business completely shut down is the problem. Overinflating our currency is the problem. Like, there's a million reasons to screech through this pandemic, Trisha, about legitimate government overreach, but that does not include every part of the pandemic, and I think Dr. Fauci has kind of become that symbol for libertarians. And on the other side, he's the sexiest man alive for the People magazine, and everything he says is legitimate. And it's like, I think a lot of us are just kind of in the middle going, all right, I'm just ready to move on because you people are all fucking nuts.
I agree so much. I feel like there was a while, especially right in the middle of it, right after summer when the numbers started spiking in the fall, no one was rational or sane. You had to be really at the far end of either spectrum. And part of it is due, like you said, I was over, I finished the pandemic earlier, whatever your phrasing was.
I retired.
Funny. Yeah. Depending on where you lived in the country or what you did for a living, you couldn't possibly have walked away from it because of the government there. So everybody, you know, some people's experience, they may have been an IT person that was able to work from home or already did and lived in a state where there wasn't as many mandates or anything like that. They didn't see a big difference. If you were in the service industry, you know, you saw the difference. I mean, your money went down, even when you went back to work, the way that things operated. If you were a musician that plays live music, you had been devastated over the last year. I know quite a few people that it just literally tore their feet out from under them. People that had to spend into their retirement. I mean, just really bad. So it depends on where you were. But again,
and what you do.
It's not necessarily that it's the pandemic was fake or coronavirus doesn't exist. It's why did we rely on the government to fix it? You know?
Yeah, I mean, early on, and for all you bitches out there, I have saved every single one of my statuses. I have a PDF. I'm so ready for you because I took this seriously. I mean, and I've said this recently because we talked a lot about the pandemic over the last month or two, and kind of looking backwards as we will in this segment. I just wanted to keep an open mind, and you know, we should have evaluated this every 2 weeks. What's changed? What's changed? What's changed? And the thing with Fauci is that he sort of did that, and that is a huge problem if you're trying to be a messenger, right? Like, the first problem is that we relied on government to save us and to protect our money and to keep us afloat and blah, blah, blah. And there are a lot of businesses that legitimately were saved by PPP, but we're seeing, as we outlined in last week, that the cost for that, right? There's a cost to all this stuff. And anytime you have central planners, this is the greatest example of failed central planning in my lifetime. You start with the CDC and the FDA and the Trump administration completely blowing testing. And once that happened, there was no lockdown or let them all run wild that was ever going to really change the outcome, in my opinion. I think once you blew testing and you didn't have that up and running, and you know, by the time I got it in April, a test cost $900 at the time. So I'm going to the store, and then I start to feel weird. And like, if I'd had available testing like they had in Germany or they had in South Korea, I could have used that information to curtail my behavior. But if you don't have that information, then you can't do anything. You're just going to do what you do. Unless you have severe symptoms or symptoms at all, right? So that was the biggest failure because that's what led to almost 600,000 people in America dying, in my opinion, unnecessarily because of the nature of the CDC. You know, then Trump initiating the lockdowns, which put Republican governors even on the side of lockdowns, because what you have to understand, and we made this point at the time, is that government is a lagging indicator. The NCAA, the NBA, they shut down 2 weeks before governors and Trump even get involved. So people were already curtailing their behavior for right action to protect each other with the theory of let's hunker down for a couple weeks, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, get us through the initial surge to not overwhelm the hospitals and then reevaluate. But then you start hearing we're going to be locked down for like 5 years. And then you see, you know, the lockdown protests not bring out anything. Then you see the George Floyd protests. And like the official retirement for me was when epidemiologists were saying that it was okay to go to George Floyd protests. Okay, well, then this is not the 1918 flu. And my personal calculus can be different because I'm just going to choose what's best for me. Like, once the government got involved in the shutdowns 2 weeks after the NBA and NCAA, resentment spiked. Then this became a culture war issue. And this was Trump's second biggest mistake, is actively nurturing that for his own reelection efforts and turning the pandemic into a culture war, which turns Fauci into either the devil or an angel instead of just a fallible human being who is going to be wrong, who is going to make bad mistakes. And the reality is, Fauci is a bureaucrat. Fauci has no real power other than he can give his opinion to people, and then it's the legislators and the executive branch that then can take action. We should be furious at our local legislators, our federal legislators, our president, our governors for the action that they took, right? But Fauci is a singular individual, and I think it just makes it easier to like focus on that. And a lot of that is nurtured by the anti-vax crowd and some of that stuff, and some of those long-running threads that have been nurtured on the right, and on the left too. Like, just the complete acceptance of whatever the man says, the complete acceptance. You know, I watched, I think I may have mentioned this on the show, but I'm watching Face the Nation, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, with the CDC director. And the CDC director is basically making the point, like, we made this decision based on the science. Never articulates what the science is, right? Like, just, it's the science, so you need to trust it, which was stupid. Because I'm a free-thinking individual that would like to actually know what the science is. But she's basically talking to Martha Raddatz saying, you know, we're now at a point where everybody can get the vaccine. It's the greatest way to protect yourself from the virus. The mask is not a good way to protect yourself from the virus. And so if a person doesn't want to get the vaccine, then what's the point of wearing the mask? Because the mask was to protect other people who are vaccinated now. And so what do we need to do this for? You know, and the thing about the masks, like, I didn't put one on until August. And I never bought into it because I was listening to Tony Fauci early on, when Tony Fauci was saying things like the following here. Hold on just a second. Just sharing the screen, taking forever.
A lot of confusion among people and misinformation surrounding face masks.
This is in March. This is in March, by the way. So this is in March of. Important. I can give you the date. It's on 60 Minutes, March 8th, 2020.
For someone who's infected, to prevent them from infecting someone else. Now, when you see people and look at the films in China and South Korea, whatever, everybody's wearing a mask. Right now in the United States, people should not be walking around with masks.
You're sure of it? Because people are listening really closely to this.
Right now, people should not be walking. There's no reason to be walking around with a mask. When you're in the middle of an outbreak, wearing a mask might make people feel a little bit better, and it might even block a droplet, but it's not providing the perfect protection that people think that it is. And often, there are unintended consequences. People keep fiddling with the mask, and they keep touching their face.
And can you get some schmutz sort of staying inside there?
Of course. But when you think masks, you should think of healthcare providers needing them and people who are ill. The people who, when you look at the films of foreign countries and you see 85% of the people wearing masks, that's fine. That's fine. I'm not against it. If you want to do it, that's fine.
But it can lead to a shortage of masks.
Exactly. That's the point. It could lead to a shortage of masks for the people who really need it.
Okay, so that is Anthony Fauci in March 8th of 2020. And that was the conventional wisdom that he set until the summertime, when everybody went into holy shit panic mode. We need to just throw everything at the wall and try it. And governors, again, being the lagging indicator, you know, we in Indianapolis fly in 110,000 people to the NCAA. We have a spike in cases of maybe less than 100. 2 people died. One of them arrived with it, though. You know, we just had the Indy 500 here with 200,000 people in an outdoor venue, the largest gathering of human beings since the pandemic began. We're seeing a slight uptick in cases. We're seeing from 200 cases a day to 400 cases a day. And the calculus, I think, for everybody who is not vested in trying to prove themselves right from what they said a year ago is, what do I need to know to protect me and my family? Right? That's been our standard here the whole time. What do I need to know? Just tell me the truth, and I will make a decision that's best for me. Now, I went to Florida twice in the past year because I was immune, Reinhold, because I had it. So I had antibodies. I got my natural vaccination. I wasn't caring for elderly family. But in December, I didn't go anywhere for 3 straight weeks before I saw my family at Christmas time, because my family was very worried about the vaccine and about the pandemic and all that. Right? So it's just being flexible-minded. Now, Fauci Fauci's mask flip-flop from what we just played to we need to wear a mask to possibly double masking pissed me off last year. Right? So when it comes out that, like, the big leaks in this email FOIA request to get all of Fauci's emails is his flip-flop on masks, which he said on TV, like I just showed you, and then getting some weird email about the origins of this stuff. The lab leak theory is a legitimate failure of the mainstream media. They never took it seriously. Anybody with a brain thought that that was a possibility and never ruled that out. So going back to the Raddatz point, I'm ADD all over the place here. So the CDC director's on the news with Martha Raddatz on CBS and is grilling her. Or no, it's ABC. My apologies. Martha Raddatz is ABC. And the CDC director is basically laying out this very like common sense point that what do you need a vaccine for, or what do you need a mask for if you're either protecting yourself or you're not. So what's the point? Martha Raddatz goes at her like 4 or 5 times, like, but isn't DeSantis in Florida going to kill people? And aren't the people in Texas a bunch of Neanderthals? And like really pushing the point. And that's been the thing with Fauci the whole time. I've said it the whole time. He meanders and supposes, and I literally watched the double masking thing happen in real time. Pete Buttigieg shows up to the inauguration with 2 masks. So Fauci is asked in a press conference, is double masking a better idea? And he's like, sure. Then you get double the protection. But blah, blah, blah. Anthony Fauci says you must double mask, and anyone that isn't double masking is killing their grandmother, right? Like, so the press has really driven the fear to the point that there are people, like we talked about last week, that are not going to have sex without a mask on, right? Like there's just this is a lot of the problem with governing a country through public opinion. It's very hard to pick out what is true anymore, and the problem ultimately isn't that there are a bunch of different opinions, it's that there is government force. And so I don't really give a flying crap about Anthony Fauci or what he says. I care what a politician thinks he said, because that monopolization of violence that we've talked about today is what really matters. Now, this comes from a great article. John Miltmore over at FEE has been really good on the lockdowns and mostly okay on the pandemic. As we say, we always separate the two, but he's written like a good primer on this, and I want to give him credit, and I'll put it in the show notes, but he linked a video about public choice theory. And I think it would be helpful to play a little bit of this video on what public choice theory is, and then we will go to the gang and kind of break this down and talk about it. Now, this is what is public choice theory from the Institute for Humane Studies with Professor Geoffrey Brennan of the Australian National University.
What is public choice theory? The standard definition is as the application of economic methods to the study of political processes. But that's not very informative unless you know what economic methods involve. So let me say a little about that matter first. Economists are interested in human action, and they believe that action involves choice. When you make a choice, there's always something you could have done instead. Choice involves comparing alternatives. That's true when you're deciding whether to spend your money on beer or pizza. It's no less true when the issues are big ones, like whether the US should withdraw its military presence from Afghanistan or whether America should have policies to reduce carbon emissions. It may not be obvious what the alternatives are in such cases. Finding out might require a bit of imagination and thought, but economists believe that such imagination and thought are necessary for proper decision-making. They think you should always ask, compared to what? Public choice economists specifically ask that question in relation to alternative ways of organising collective decision-making. And in particular, when they ask, compared to what, they want to compare the outcomes of market decisions to the outcomes of political decisions. Why do they think that's important? Well, many people, when they see something wrong in the world, have a kind of automatic response. They say, government ought to do something about that. And when they think about what it is that government ought to do, they think in terms of the best policy that could be applied. Now, asking what would be the best policy, say to tackle inflation or deal with the Chinese presence in the South China Seas or manage the threat of climate change, is not in itself a bad question, but public choice theorists insist that this question isn't the right question. They think that asking this question makes certain assumptions about what kind of actor government is and what motivates it in its decisions. They think that this way of thinking about policy issues implies a benevolent despot conception of government, and they think that that benevolent despot conception is dangerously misconceived. Consider the despot part first. When you ask, what should government do, it seems to imply that government's just like an individual agent with the power to make decisions over policy options according to whatever he or she thinks is best, without constraint. But an individual with that kind of power would be a despot. Instead, in democratic systems, government is subject to elections. Governments therefore have to implement policies that appeal to the electorate, indeed that maximise the chance that they'll win the next election. To ignore those electoral factors is to ignore an absolutely key piece of the democratic system, which means that to analyse what the best policy option would be without considering whether such a policy could appeal to voters or survive the real-world legislative process is a case of Hamlet without the prince. Public choice theorists want to put the democratic electoral process centre stage in any analysis of policy. They want to ask not what policy would be best, but rather what policy is likely to emerge from real-world democratic politics. And how does that compare to market alternatives? And then there's the benevolent part of the benevolent despot. When you ask, what should government do, you also imply that those in government are motivated to try to choose the very best policies for the public good. But when it comes to political agents, it's surely a mistake simply to assume that what motivates such persons exclusively is their desire to do good. After all, the working assumption in economics is that ordinary folk operating in markets are motivated predominantly by self-interest. Why should we assume that politicians and bureaucrats are motivated any differently than anyone else? To be sure, any serious candidate for political office, from president down, makes out that he or she is basically a good person, someone who really cares about the people. But there's always more to it than that. Candidates want to be elected, they want the political power and the public attention that goes with office. They often rather like free holidays and lavish gifts, which is why in most democracies there are laws that aim to stop politicians from accepting these things. The logic of public choice theory is that we need to take seriously the fact that government is a complex social machine, inhabited by people who are more or less the same as everyone else, and in which periodic elections play a central role. The critical question for assessing policy is not what policy is the best we can imagine, but rather what, from what we know of real-world politics, is the policy that's most likely to emerge from the policy determination process.
Okay, so this entire thought and this assessment from a libertarian think tank is an important distinction. We often get messages from the libertarian sphere that there is a leftist Borg that is trying to assimilate all of society and they will become the ruling faction. And there is some truth to the fact that the Ron Brownstein, who's a writer for The Atlantic, has a new book out talking about the 60s revolution and the parties and the culture and basically how, like, things that were not mainstream or radical, like questioning authority, questioning police, have become accepted standard notions when they were radical in 1969. We just did a show on it, right? And so a lot of the values of the left have been adopted, but a lot of that is because some of those liberal policies give individuals greater liberal freedom, right? Like gay rights, for instance. But that has also led to the notion that the government is good and the markets are bad. That there is this notion that the Ayn Rand reading businessman is just purely motivated out of self-interest and is purely motivated out of trying to enrich themselves and doesn't have any concern for the common good, for the public good. And that's where you need people to come in like politicians like Anthony Fauci to protect us, because they are only concerned with the common good. And again, there is some truth to the fact that somebody, not Anthony Fauci, who's the highest paid federal employee, he probably, instead of making $4 million a year, could make $50 million a year in the private sector. But that's still a lot of money, right? But a lot of people who are police officers who make $60,000 a year, or teachers, or people who are bureaucrats, they don't tend to do it for the money. And if, I worked in politics 10 years before I started this show. This show's 10 years old. So I've been in the political sphere in this town for 20 years, and I can tell you that politicians, bureaucrats, and people that take a government paycheck do not view themselves as malevolent. They view themselves as sacrificing their income to work for the common good, but they rarely step back and see that they are harming the common good with their outcomes. And so we often have to think about those motivations and question, why does Anthony Fauci think he's doing good? Why does a school principal, think he's doing good? It may be coming from legitimately good places, but they're usually not liking criticism. They're not self-reflecting. They're not taking in their own biases because they've been washed in the propaganda of, I am working for the common good. And so the Fauci debate is probably the greatest example of all of this in my life. He genuinely believes what he's saying. I don't believe the notions that he, some of from the fever swamps and all the stuff about Anthony Fauci, and he's, on the plane with Bill Gates to Epstein Island and all that stuff, right? I think he's just profoundly wrong in how he applies his viewpoint. And this has been a great example of it. So when, Reinhold, I read these emails, I go, this person is wrong-headed. And I don't think there's any way that you can look at it, because you're probably going to argue with me on some of this stuff. Trish and I are one team and you're on another. There's no doubt he lied to us about masks. That was self-evident last year. That's why it was so galling that then he and public health officials started pushing masks, because it never was going to protect you. It was never going to keep you safe. It was about the minimal chance that you're keeping droplets from projecting onto other people. And it started way late into the pandemic. So I look at it and I go, there's no way that wasn't a lie. That what he was saying on 60 Minutes and what he was saying in these emails, he lied to the public about masks and should be held accountable for that. But he also doesn't have the power to implement mask mandates. That's your local town, your city, your state, your federal government that can do some of those things. So when I read the Fauci emails, I just kind of see a big nothing burger, because it just validates the problems that I've had with him from the beginning.
Well, I think a lot of this stems from a huge misunderstanding of what masks were made to do and intended to do in this whole pandemic situation. So remember, when he says that he believes that it helped in that initial interview in March, he believed that if you have it and you have a mask on, you're going to help protect other people from getting it. And that's always been the message, that masks are there to help protect you from spreading it to other people. It was never meant to completely make you 100% safe from getting it. It does provide some protection, but how much is very minimal. And he made the calculation, I believe, in March, that how much that minimal protection wasn't worth putting the country out of stock so that those masks weren't able to be used by people who were frontline and dealing with the virus on a daily basis. And that's the other questions of, he didn't believe that the masks had zero effect at all and were completely useless. Why would he protect the stock for the people who were out there on the front lines fighting the virus? It was there because it does provide some, right? So we get into this whole argument about, the extremes on either side. Well, it's completely needed because it's going to protect your life, or it's useless and you should get rid of it. And it's not. It's somewhere in the middle on that spectrum of whether or not masks can do any good or not. Now, if you had N95 mask, you might be able to protect yourself a lot better. But there was also a lot of misunderstanding about the virus at the time. In March, we didn't know if it was an aerosol type of virus or if it was a virus that's passed by water droplets. Come to find out, it's not highly aerosol capable. It's not going to fly through the air and infect people because it doesn't last that long in the air. It'll not pass that way. It's usually from the droplets. When we find out that the droplets are now the main spread, the masks become more of a potential way to protect from that. Not 100%. No one's ever said that the masks were 100% going to protect you from the virus. So what I see is someone who has trying to give their best recommendation, has the information that they have at the time. They make that recommendation. As things are learned and situations change, they change their recommendation. But the thing about Fauci is that he never dictated any of that. That was all government that dictated it, right? Not, he wasn't out there making the mandates. He wasn't out there telling the politicians what to do. And the politicians were looking for their own protection and doing their own decisions based off of what other people were saying.
But to that point, Dennis, because I do, in some ways, I agree with you. It's you're not going to look to some guy that's a doctor and say he's, infallible and he ran around and, made every governor do everything. But you say he was a guy trying to do his best and make recommendations. And he's also influenced by the government. So would he done that if he was in private practice and talking to a private citizen or maybe a head of a hospital group or anything like that? There has to be something to be said about he comes out and says the masks. Well, you know what? Let's go ahead and do it. I don't think he just woke up one day and said, you know what? Maybe that small percentage is a good thing. I'm pretty sure he had a lot of other influence to come out and say what he did.
It's a lot of the tide. The tide pushes these people towards a position. The public sector did not have the mindset or the ability to imagine shutting down the NBA. The NBA had to do it themselves. And it was a great example that we were going to protect ourselves through private means from the pandemic and do what was responsible for everyone. It never had anything to do with the government shutting down the NBA and the NCAA tournament. And then this year when the risks have been reassessed and everyone is getting vaccinated and has the ability for both the NCAA tournament and the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, the government hampered their ability to do things. I will tell you, when I walked out to my seats at the Indianapolis 500, surrounded by a sea of people, less than 1% was wearing a mask that day. And if you need unless you think this is just, this is a red state, I talked to people from Wisconsin, from Minnesota, Illinois, from blue states who did not have masks on. It is a great sample size to show that the person who is screaming that once we put these masks on, they're never going to let us take them off. That was never the case, because 100,000 people just said, I've assessed my risks. I don't think the mask really works. I have the vaccine. I'm here. There's no outside transmission on a windy, sunny day. I don't need to wear this BS. But the mask ambassadors walking around and forcing people. One mask ambassador got fired because he wasn't wearing his mask. And Jeremiah's RV mate, basically. And I was so jealous he got the mask ambassador sign. But the reality is that crowd of 200,000 people last Sunday decided the pandemic was over. And they're going back to regular life. And the lagging indicator is best exemplified by the blue states. They're not looking at Indiana and Florida and some of these other red states and going, 50% of the country's got the same numbers that we do. But those politicians in the blue states need to justify their phony baloney jobs by perpetuating just bad science at this point. But that's going to have a cost, because those 200,000 people at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, where less than 1% of people were wearing a mask, are going to have their ass handed to it. Like, they're going to let those politicians have it, because I can't run my business. I can't make money as a server. I'm tired of wearing a mask. I don't need to, like, every single one of those race car drivers that we talked to on Media Day were pissed off they still had to wear the mask. Like, these are not, like, politically motivated people. Like, and so politicians are a lagging indicator. And Trisha, you're exactly right in that the public determines what's going to happen ultimately, and politicians take too long to fix it, to move with where the people are at. And that's why markets respond so much better than politicians, because we would have been out of the pandemic and back to regular life far faster had it not been for politicians and lockdowns. And the evidence is clear between the 50-state experiment that our founders gave to us. Harry, you look like you have something to say.
Correct, yeah. It was because being the only scientist here on the show.
Oh, look at this white lab coat that Harry has on. Clearly, an intelligent scientist has joined the program. Please, Dr. Price.
Yeah, I think they did. Fauci and most of the government did a very disservice not talking about the science and sort of just saying, well, it's the science and the science is settled. In all reality, when they were trying to say, like, well, all science really is just the study of things and trying to prove different things, which was ridiculous to say, well, the science is settled. Science is never settled. They never settle on anything. It's complete disservice. But it was the mask thing was because you saw the tide was being torn because it was moving because people wanted to get back to normal and open things back up, and they also saw the panic the government was causing by locking things down. That's why you never really saw a grocery store get shut down and call it a super spreader event, because honestly, if it could be spread by people being that close together and cause a actual super spreader event, it would have been the protest.
Can you imagine, and this happened in a couple places, can you imagine if they had shut down grocery stores and not allowed you to buy food like China? Can you imagine and that's why the American approach never really worked in terms of, like, in Italy, Spain, you didn't leave your house because there were people with guns outside the other side of the door. In America, it was like honor system, right? Mm-hmm. And I promise to behave. And so you just had pervasive cases because the government ultimately, as much as libertarians love to screech about how unfree we are, there are some aspects to the greatest invasion of liberty in our time that also kind of show how powerless they are. I mean, go ahead, Dr. Price. Let Dr. Price. Okay. No. Hold on. Let Reinhold and I argue. Go ahead. Why are you wrong?
You keep saying the greatest invasion of civil rights, and it rubs me the wrong way.
I never said civil rights. I didn't say invasion of liberty in our lifetime.
Liberty, okay.
Our lifetime, right, is the key word there.
For people who are normally not as affected by government as we are, right? I mean, there's a majority of people
on the grand scale in terms
as,
of just raw numbers, not population percentages. In terms of raw numbers, when you have entire states like California where you're not able to get a haircut still, or you can't go to the gym in Philadelphia because the government says so, that's a pretty damn big invasion of liberty.
It is, but it's also the types of invasions of liberties that disparate groups of people in this country have been dealing with on a much harsher level for decades and decades.
I would say that the first half of this program shows that I see that as a concern as well, and that
I know that. I'm just saying when you say it that way, it just kind of rubs me wrong, because it's almost like we're only focusing on the things that affect us or affect the majority of people, and it. I'm not saying you're doing that. I'm just saying that's how it rubs me. And what really bothers me is that a lot of people aren't getting the lesson they need to be learning from this, is that the type of liberty violation that we did encounter with the lockdowns and all of that stuff are things that people are going through all the time. And because it doesn't affect us, a lot of people have it out of their mind, or it's something else that's going on, or it's not as important to them.
When it
affects them, it becomes important.
Right. We made this exact point last year on the show. Like, hey, how does it feel? I mean, I remember doing the episode during the George Floyd stuff saying, hey, if you went to a lockdown protest, you understand what it feels like to be at the Floyd protests. Right, Trisha? Like, I think that the left-leaning libertarians have made a huge mistake. I don't think you're wrong, but I also think like leading some of those more right-leaning libertarians to the water and saying like, think about your position and where you're at and understand that mentality, as opposed to saying like, get the inference, not exactly what you're doing, but I've seen it online, is you need to get over it because minority groups in this country have it harder. And it's a fair criticism because the right-leaning libertarians have not done a great job. They've been juxtaposing with completely making up reasons why we shouldn't care about black people and critical race theory, and like you know, both sides are kind of not seeing the overlap, Trisha, that they have. And I think we can take a lot away from the last year in both of these two issues and seeing, hey, I didn't like when this happened to me, so we need to find any law that treats other minority groups and erase those laws. Like occupation laws are on the ropes because of it.
No, I agree. And nobody comes to liberty because somebody compared their pain and said it was worse than others. I do think perspective is important.
Yeah.
Like what Dennis says. Dennis can look inside and say, hey, you know what? I can be really upset about this, but this is how this person feels. But that comes from internal forces. So when external forces say, well, that's worse than this, or you shouldn't compare this to this. Yeah, there's a little bit of perspective to be gained there, but it's you're never going to get somebody to come over to liberty by telling them that their pain isn't as bad as yours. So I think saying, yeah, you know what? I get that. This is kind of how I felt in this situation. Or, you know, most people come to libertarianism and small government or whatever because they experience something themselves.
Yeah.
So I would say that saying, look at what you experienced. This is what the government does. Hey, it happens over here too. I mean, it's a good thing. You just have to be careful how you say, well, your pain is worse, so it doesn't matter to me. That's a really bad way to start somebody down a path to liberty.
No, it's as I said, it's the lesson I don't think is getting learned. And it's the same. I see this all the time where there should be a lesson that gets learned. You would think that people would see it and they just completely miss it. They just run straight into the brick wall with their head and they just don't catch it. And like, we shouldn't give the president so much power because look what happened. You could have Trump get in there, and then the Democrats are like, he shouldn't have all this power. Well, you shouldn't have given Obama all that power, right?
Or Bush.
Mean, they're not learning that lesson. They're just
right.
saying we just need the right people in. It's that sort of thing. A lot of people are not catching the point, and it's frustrating to me.
Harry, final thought?
What about them?
I mean, as a doctor, we need your learned opinion on this.
Well, yeah.
Why don't you stand up and give us a little spin? Let's take a look at you. Can't just hire a pretty face.
Do a little turn on the catwalk.
Sorry, if you want that, you have to subscribe to my only
your only Harry's page.
Yeah, only Harry's page. But no, yeah, I'm gonna circle back just like it from this last year. You really did find like the people who wanted to have rational conversations about different things, especially about the pandemic. I will tell you that much. And coming from someone who freaked out early and then had to change because based off of new information, it's very hard to be the one that was sounding the alarm and freaking out and then learning new information and coming back to it and realizing not everyone else has because of the news and because of Fauci and the way he was bringing it about.
You said in the show in like February, like, we need to watch this. This is a really concerning thing. And I was like, oh, whatever. We see all this. Oh, okay, pig flu. I get you. Whatever. And then I saw Osterholm. I was like, oh shit, Harry was right.
Yeah, it's like, and I really thought it was going to get bad like that. Like they were going to shut down grocery stores and do everything, like because no one knew had anything. And having to go through the signs and actually read about the water, the whole thing, like what Fauci was talking about, the water droplet theory and how it was passed around. Yeah, people in Korea was having these discussions on which mask type would actually stop this thing.
You remember the mask maker that put out the chart that showed that the N95 was the only thing that might protect you and everything else, like your grandmother's mask that she made you isn't going to do anything?
Correct. Yeah. And then I was trying to talk to people on how to like make these masks. Like I was showing people, it's like, yeah, just you buy certain air filters have that different filtering in it, cut it up and you can make a good mask out of it. I made sure I bought I think beforehand, I bought up like the full face mask, the super mask that everyone like that flew off the shelves. Like,
were you paranoid, or were you trying to be prepared?
I was trying to be prepared. I just don't like being caught flat-footed to anything. Like even right now, I think I bought another because of the ransomware attack that just happened on one of the large chicken producers that happened over the weekend, and so the chicken shortage is going to start happening, and so these ransomware attacks are going to keep happening. So I went out and bought 3 months of food. Food is grocery. I got 3 months of storable food. I increased my storage supplies now, so I'm sitting at 6.
I had no storage. I was one of those idiots in the grocery store like a week before every other idiot was in the grocery store, because I'm like, I'm not prepared. If the government really does try an Italy or China thing where they like won't let you go to the grocery store, I'm going to be hungry. Like, and so there was a period where it's like, all right, what do I need to prepare for? Like, because it was never about like, I was never really worried about the virus, but people were acting so crazy that it's like, are we going to have like mass, like the riots didn't come till the summer, but like, what are people going to do? Like, I just didn't trust the other idiots.
Well, you will live in the pod and you will eat the bugs, okay? And I was jokingly at that time just trying to get people to pay attention to it. Like, hey, you see what's happening? Anybody want to stock up? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, okay, well, if you're not going to stock up on food or water or anything like that, how about booze? Because FEMA will probably bring you food. They're not going to bring you booze, okay?
Oh, I thought you said boobs. I was like,
no.
I think even during the pandemic, Trisha, you could still get those delivered.
But like you could go out, like, yeah, you can go out and freaking like, so like I went out and like I made sure I had like 3 months worth of whiskey at my house.
But you had to find some humility at some point and recognize that new information was presented to you and you weren't wrong and you didn't need to be as concerned. And did you then go on Facebook and try to find information that originally proved you right and tell everyone how right you were? Or did you just go, yeah, I was a little wrong and I'm just going to move on with my life and at least I have some extra food?
Yeah, I just realized, I just realized I was wrong and I just moved on, But I'm only wrong to the aspect on, well, they didn't shut the grocery stores down because it didn't spread as bad as I think that, and they weighted against the idea of how people would panic. Yes, we'd probably be done with everything if they would have did the whole like super lockdown. No one's going on the roads. Everyone's just staying at home. But most people can't sit at home for 2 weeks. They cannot.
I remember finding an article from a study in May or June that showed that there was no spread. We talked about it on the show. There was no spread in grocery stores. Because if you're just passing people, the people who get infected at grocery stores are the cashiers who stand there and take a viral load to the face every single day. So,
and they were not front line to get the freaking vaccine either,
which was insane to me because those people, nurses and like restaurant workers and grocers, truckers. Not teachers.
Yeah, not teachers. Truckers should have been there.
But why did teachers get it first? Because they're the best politically connected, and you've hit on it, Harry. Yep. Is that the central planner who tries to determine outcomes to protect us, and we need to do this or that, cannot do that as efficiently or as effectively as the market can. Just people making individual choices, and human action will take care of the rest.
Correct. This shows you how poorly planned out everything. So if this virus was just slightly worse, right? And they're like, well, this is who we're going to give it out. Yes, frontline workers, right? Give it to them. Give it to the food production industry, the truckload, the people who keeps the lifeblood that keeps everything running. Like the idea that when I even said sit at home for 2 weeks, I mean sit at home for 2 weeks with you have no water, you can't flush the toilet, you can't turn your light on, you have no internet. That type of 2 week shutdown, you can't do it. Yeah. So those people that keep those amenities, those services, those luxuries that allow you to stay at your house so you can work from home, those people should have got the vaccine first, not all these other people that freaking got it. It was ridiculous. The vaccine should have been, instead of wasting it and giving it to all these states and doing that, they should have pumped it to the food production facilities. The farmers should have got it. All these things that just kept everything moving. But nope, we're going to do it. Lottery system, going to give it to the boomers. Let's go.
Right. Crap. Quickly, final thoughts from you, Trisha.
Oh, as far as Fauci, the Fauci emails and things like that. I just wanted to add that I think everybody thinks this is going to be some smoking gun, and I think it's tantamount to the government admitting they don't know what UFOs are.
Right. Everybody's very amped up, and it's just like, I just don't see it. Like, if you were watching, this has happened a lot from both of the extremes. Like, if you were just watching the regular news and kind of paying close attention to what was going on last year, you weren't surprised in August when somebody said something or some rate was hitting some other, like, it just was all kind of there. But a lot of people in April weren't taking it seriously because this is all fake. And, like, they rightly were saying, this is just going to be used as an intrusion on my liberty, so I'm not even going to participate, and I'm not going to learn anything about it. I'm not going to play along, and my stubbornness will just be my dissent. Okay, I get that, but don't pretend later that you were following the news and understand what was going on. Reinhold?
Oh, just I think I pretty much covered it with Fauci. I don't think he's, maliciously trying to do anything. I think he had one belief and he changed his mind. I think part of the problem with him being a politician is that he is kind of a flip-flopper on day to day based off the information he gets that day or things he hears, and he reevaluates, and public doesn't like that in politicians. Right. So that's going to really hurt him in the long run. But I don't think there's really anything mind-blowing or shocking in any of the emails that were released, other than the fact that there were a lot of crank people that were sending him emails.
Yeah.
And the other part is that he's horrible about hitting reply all when he should just be hitting reply. That's the worst thing I found in those emails.
All right. And with that, we are going to say goodbye. Thank you, Tricia. Make sure you go check out Gingerarchy. Thank you, Harry. Thank you, Reinhold. We appreciate everybody listening to the program here. If you enjoyed it, if you learned something, please share, and make sure you go check out Jason's website, Free Thought Project, and we will see you again next week.